The morning sun hadn't even fully burned the dew off the Kentucky bluegrass when I saw her. I was sitting at my kitchen island, sipping a black coffee and checking the livestock prices on my tablet. Through the window that overlooked my gravel driveway, a flash of neon pink caught my eye. It was Martha Higgins. Locally, we called her the Enforcer, though she held no official title other than being the self-appointed president of a homeowners association that didn't actually exist for my property. I lived 3 miles outside the suburban line, on 40 acres of hardened dirt and timber. Martha lived in the manicured cul-de-sac across the main road, but she treated the entire county like it was her personal dollhouse. She was marching up my driveway with a clipboard tucked under her arm and a look of pinched suburban fury on her face. I sighed, set my coffee down and watched. I didn't go out to meet her. On my land, you don't get a greeting until you prove you belong there. The intrusion. Martha didn't knock on the front door. She bypassed the porch entirely and headed straight for the detached 3-bay garage. This wasn't just a place for cars, it was my sanctuary. It housed my restored 1968 Chevy C10, my woodworking tools, and a collection of vintage signs I'd spent 20 years gathering. It was also, legally, a private structure on private land. I watched on my security monitor as she tried the side service door. It was locked. She huffed, her chest heaving in that way people do when they feel their authority is being challenged by a literal piece of hardware. Then, she walked around to the main bay doors. The middle door was slightly cracked, maybe 4 inches, to let the humidity out. Martha leaned down, grabbed the handle, and with a strength fueled by pure entitlement, heaved the heavy rolling door upward. The metallic rattle echoed across the yard. She stepped inside, disappearing into the shadows of my shop. I didn't move for a full minute. I just stared at the empty doorway. I'm a patient man, a live and let live kind of guy, but there is a specific line in the sand for men like me. She hadn't just crossed it, she'd stomped all over it with her designer sneakers. The lockdown. I stood up, grabbed my keys from the hook, and walked out the back mudroom. I didn't run. I walked with the steady, heavy pace of a man who knew exactly how this story was going to end. As I approached the garage, I could hear her voice echoing inside. She was talking to herself, or perhaps into a voice memo app on her phone. Substandard electrical, visible oil staining, possible zoning violation regarding commercial storage, she muttered. I reached the large bay door she had opened. Without saying a word, I grabbed the handle and slammed it down. Clang, the heavy internal latch clicked into place. Martha let out a muffled shriek from the other side. "Who's there? Open this door immediately," she screamed, her voice vibrating against the steel. I walked around to the side service door, the one she had tried earlier. I took my heavy-duty padlock, snapped it through the hasp, and clicked it shut. Now, the only way out was through the windows, which were reinforced with security bars I'd installed after a local break-in 3 years ago. Arthur, is that you?" she yelled, her voice losing its edge of authority and gaining a sharp tint of panic. "This isn't funny. I'm conducting a neighborhood safety inspection." "Martha," I said, my voice calm and low as I leaned against the doorframe. "You're on private property. You're currently inside a locked structure. And last I checked, you aren't a building inspector, a fire marshal, or a deity." "I saw smoke yesterday," she lied, her voice cracking. "I thought there was a fire hazard. I was performing a public service." "The only smoke you saw was from my smoker when I was doing a brisket, Martha. And the only hazard here is your inability to raid, no trespassing signs." I pulled my phone out. I didn't call the local police. I called the sheriff. Silas Vance had been the sheriff here for 15 years and we'd gone to high school together. He knew my character, and more importantly, he knew Martha's reputation for filing frivolous, nuisance reports against everyone who didn't mow their lawn in a crosshatch pattern. "The wait." "Silas," I said when he picked up. "I've got a prowler locked in my garage. Caught her red-handed breaking in. I need a deputy out here to file the paperwork." "A prowler at your place, Artie?" Silas asked, sounding surprised. "Everything all right?" "I'm fine, but the intruder is pretty vocal. It's Martha Higgins." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, followed by a heavy, weary groan. "I'll be there in 10 minutes, don't let her out." "Wasn't planning on it," I said. I sat down on a stump about 20 feet from the garage. Martha was now pounding on the metal door. It was a rhythmic, desperate sound. "Arthur, let me out this instant. Do you have any idea who my husband is? He's on the board of the bank." "Then he should have no trouble posting your bail," I called back. "You're kidnapping me. This is false imprisonment." "Actually," I replied, checking my watch, "it's a citizen's detention of a suspected burglar. You broke into a secured building. I'm just making sure the evidence, which is you, doesn't flee the scene." The confrontation. 10 minutes later, the sheriff's cruiser kicked up dust as it pulled into my drive. Sealers climbed out, adjusted his belt, and looked at the garage, then at me. He looked like a man who had dealt with too many small-town dramas for one lifetime. "She in there?" he asked. "Safe and sound," I said, handing him the key to the padlock. As Sealers unlocked the side door, Martha practically tumbled out. Her hair, usually a perfect bob, was frizzed from the garage humidity. Her neon-pink vest was smudged with grease from where she'd bumped into my truck. "Sheriff, thank God," she wailed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Arrest him. He trapped me. He threatened me. I was nearly suffocated in that dungeon." Sealers looked at the dungeon, which was a clean, well-lit workspace with a high-end ventilation system. Then he looked at Martha. "Martha, what were you doing inside Arthur's garage?" "I told you, an inspection. There are codes, Sealers. There are standards. Look at the way he stores those chemicals." She pointed vaguely toward my shelf of turtle wax and motor oil. "Did Arthur invite you in?" Sealers asked, his voice dropping into that official tone that usually meant someone was about to have a very bad day. Well, no, but the door was open. It was an invitation to the public." "Martha," Sealers said, stepping closer, "this is a private farm. A cracked garage door isn't an invitation, it's a vent. You trespassed. Then you entered a closed structure. That's breaking and entering in this county." "You can't be serious," she shrieked. "I'm Martha Higgins." "I'm the president of the—" "You're the president of a book club that meets at the library," Sealers interrupted. "Arthur, do you want to press charges?" I looked at Martha. For a second, I saw the flicker of genuine fear in her eyes. She had spent her whole life using the rules as a weapon against others, never dreaming the rules could be turned back on her. She thought her status as a concerned citizen made her immune to the law. "I do," I said firmly. "I want her trespassed from the property formally, and I want a report filed for the break-in. If I don't, she'll be back next week looking in my mailbox." The aftermath. The process took an hour. Sealers walked her to the cruiser, not in handcuffs, out of a lingering sense of small-town professional courtesy, but he made her sit in the back. Seeing her face behind that wire partition was a sight I'd never forget. She looked small. Without the power of her clipboard and her indignant stares, she was just an old woman who hadn't learned how to respect a fence. Before Sealers drove off, he leaned out the window. "You handled that well, Artie. Most guys would have started shouting, locking the door and calling me. That's the clean way to do it." "I just wanted to make sure she finished her inspection thoroughly," I joked. After they left, the silence returned to the farm. It was a different kind of silence than before, heavier, more settled. I walked back into the garage and looked around. The air still smelled like sawdust and old oil. My C10 sat there, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. I realized then that Martha hadn't just been inspecting for codes. She was looking for a way to control something she didn't understand. She saw a man living a quiet, independent life, and it bothered her. People like Martha can't stand it when they can't find a hook to hang their judgment on. I walked over to the bay door and lowered it again, but this time I didn't lock it with a sense of anger. I locked it with a sense of peace. The resolution. A week later, the for sale sign went up in front of Martha's house. The rumor at the general store was that the humiliation of the sheriff's visit had been too much for her. Her husband, embarrassed by the legal fees and the gossip, had decided it was time to move closer to their daughter in the city. I was at the store buying a bag of feed when I ran into Sealers again. "She's moving," Sealers said, leaning against his truck. "Guess she decided the codes in this part of the county weren't up to her standards." "Glad to hear it," I said. "I like my neighbors, Sealers, but I like my privacy more." "You know," Sealers laughed, "the whole town is talking about it. They're calling you the Karen Slayer." I shook my head. "I'm not a slayer. I'm just a man who knows where his dirt ends and the world begins." I drove back home, the sun setting behind the hills, casting long, golden shadows over my pastures. As I pulled into the driveway, I looked at the garage. It looked solid, permanent. I went inside, poured myself a glass of bourbon, and sat on the porch. The world is full of people who think they have the right to tell you how to live, how to work, and how to keep your own house. They think their loud voices and official postures give them power over the quiet ones. But they forget one thing. When you're on your own land, standing on the foundation you built with your own hands, you don't have to play by their script. You don't have to argue. You don't have to shout. You just have to let the law and the locks do the talking. Martha Higgins thought she was the one in charge. She thought she was the hero of her own story, the brave protector of suburbia. She thought she could walk into my life and demand an accounting. But she found out the hard way. This wasn't her story. It was mine, and in this story I wasn't the victim and I wasn't the bystander. I'm him,